The evening rush at Bellini's was in full swing. The clink of silverware against fine china mixed with the hum of conversation as wealthy diners enjoyed their meals under the soft glow of crystal chandeliers. In the corner stood a magnificent, grand piano, its polished surface reflecting the warm lighting of the upscale Chicago restaurant. May worked her way between the tables with practiced grace. At 26, she had perfected the art of being present without being noticed, of anticipating needs before they were voiced. Tonight was especially busy, and she had been on her feet for nearly 10 hours already. Her lower back ached, but her smile never faltered as she delivered a plate of seared scallops to table 12. "Can I get you anything else?" she asked, tucking a strand of dark hair behind her ear. "Another bottle of the Sauvignon Blanc," the businessman replied without looking up from his phone. May nodded and made her way back toward the kitchen, pausing to clear empty glasses from another table. As she passed the piano, her fingers twitched slightly at her side, an unconscious gesture that went unnoticed by everyone except the sharp-eyed man at table 7. Thomas Reed sat alone, observing the restaurant with the calculated interest of someone who rarely found himself surprised by anything. At 43, his tech company had just hit a valuation of $3 billion, and he'd come to Bellini's to celebrate in his own quiet way, watching people who had no idea who he was. He preferred it that way. Fame was useful for business, but privacy was what he truly valued. He'd been watching the same server for the past hour. There was something different about her, a kind of quiet dignity that stood out among the staff. When she brought his bourbon, he noticed her humming, something under her breath. Not the pop music that usually played in the restaurant's background, but something more complex. His years of forced childhood piano lessons hadn't been completely wasted. He recognized Chopin when he heard it. "Your bourbon, sir," May said, placing the crystal tumbler on a small napkin. "Thank you," Thomas replied, studying her more openly now. "That was Chopin you were humming, wasn't it? Nocturne in E-flat major?" May blinked in surprise, a slight flush coloring her cheeks. "Yes, it was. I'm sorry. I didn't realize I was doing it." "No need to apologize. It's not what I expected to hear in a restaurant, that's all." "You know classical music?" "A little," she said with a small smile that suggested it was more than a little. "Will there be anything else, sir?" Thomas was about to let her go when something made him pause. Perhaps it was boredom or curiosity or the strange emptiness that sometimes came with success. "Actually, I have a question," he said, gesturing to the piano. "Does anyone ever play that thing, or is it just for show?" "Just for show, mostly," May replied. "We have a pianist on Saturday nights, but that's it." "Shame to let such a beautiful instrument sit silent," Thomas mused, swirling his bourbon. "I'd bet you could play it, couldn't you?" The slight stiffening of her shoulders told him he'd hit a nerve. "I'm just a server, sir," she said politely, but there was something in her eyes, a flash of something deeper that vanished as quickly as it had appeared. "And I'm just a guy having dinner," Thomas countered with a smile that had convinced countless investors to take chances on his ideas. "But I've got a feeling about you." May glanced around the restaurant nervously. "I should check on my other tables." "Wait," Thomas said, making a sudden decision. He pulled out his checkbook, an old-fashioned gesture in a digital age, but one he kept for moments that required ceremony. "I want to make you an offer." "Sir?" "Play something on that piano, just one piece. If you do, I'll write you a check, right now for $50,000. May's eyes widened and she nearly dropped the empty glass she was holding. "That's not funny," she whispered. "I'm not joking," Thomas replied, his voice carrying just enough that diners at nearby tables glanced over with interest. $50,000, tax-free, cash it tomorrow." By now the tables closest to them had fallen silent, attention drawn to the unusual exchange. May stood frozen, her professional mask slipping to reveal genuine distress. "Mr. Reed," she said, quietly, recognizing him now. "I don't know what game you're playing, but I could lose my job." The restaurant manager, sensing something unusual happening, approached with a concerned expression. "Is everything all right here?" he asked, looking between Thomas and May. "Everything's fine, Carlo," Thomas said smoothly. I was just making a business proposition to your employee. I want her to play the piano. Carlo's eyebrows shot up. Mr. Reed, our servers aren't entertainers. If you'd like music, I can arrange for our Saturday pianist to come in tomorrow. Not interested, Thomas cut him off. I want to hear her play. He looked directly at May. $50,000. One piece of music. Your choice. The restaurant had grown increasingly quiet as more diners tuned into the drama unfolding before them. May felt her chest tighten with anxiety as dozens of eyes turned toward her. The weight of their stares pressed against her skin, making it hard to breathe. I don't play anymore, she said so softly that Thomas had to lean forward to hear her. But you did once, he replied, not as a question but as a statement of fact. Carlo looked bewildered. May, you play piano? She didn't answer, her eyes fixed on some middle distance as memories she'd kept carefully locked away for years threatened to surface. Thomas watched her face with the same intensity he'd used to assess countless business opportunities. He saw the conflict there, not greed fighting with pride as he'd initially expected, but something more complex. Pain, longing, fear. 100,000, he said quietly, causing gasps from the nearby tables. Carlo's eyes bulged. Mr. Reed, please. It's fine, Carlo, May said suddenly, her voice steadier than it had been moments before. She untied her apron and handed it to her stunned manager. I'll play one piece. The room fell completely silent as she walked toward the piano. Every eye followed her slender figure as she approached the instrument that dominated the corner of the restaurant. The hostess stopped seating new guests. The bartender paused mid-pour. Even the kitchen staff peered through the service doors, drawn by the unusual hush that had fallen over the dining room. May stood beside the piano for a long moment, not touching it, as if gathering courage or perhaps saying a silent goodbye to something. Her hands trembled slightly at her sides. Thomas watched with growing fascination. This wasn't the reaction of someone who played casually. This was the approach of someone confronting a piece of their soul they'd tried to forget. She sat down, slowly, adjusting the bench with the automatic precision of someone who had done so thousands of times before. Her back straightened, shoulders relaxed, and hands hovered above the keys. For a heartbeat, she closed her eyes. No one in the restaurant knew what they were about to witness. They didn't know that 20 years ago, a 6-year-old girl in Shanghai had been called a prodigy after playing Mozart from memory. They didn't know about the grueling hours of practice that followed, the competitions won, the sacrifices made by parents who believed their daughter was destined for greatness. They didn't know about the scholarship to the prestigious conservatory in America, or how it vanished when her father's business collapsed and the family needed every penny just to survive. They didn't know that the last time she'd touched a piano was the day she'd sold her own instrument to pay for her mother's medicine. No one knew that for 8 years, May had walked past music stores with her eyes averted, had changed radio stations. When classical pieces played, had built a wall between herself and the passion that once defined her existence. As her fingers finally touched the keys, a small sigh escaped her lips, the sound of someone coming home after a very long journey. The first notes filled the room, tentative at first, like someone testing thin ice. Then, as if a dam had broken, the music poured out of her. Her hands moved with fluid precision, building complex harmonies that seemed impossible for human fingers to create. Thomas's smug expression faded as he realized what he was witnessing. This wasn't some server who could play a little piano. This was artistry of the highest caliber, the kind that came from rare talent shaped by years of disciplined study. Diners sat transfixed as Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2 unfolded in all its emotional complexity. Some recognized the piece from movies or commercials, but none had heard it played with such technical perfection and raw emotion in a setting like this. An older woman at a corner table pressed a hand to her mouth, tears welling in her eyes. A teenager who had been scrolling through his phone throughout dinner set it down and stared open-mouthed at the transformation happening before him. The restaurant's regular bartender, who had worked alongside May for 3 years without knowing her secret, stood completely still, a forgotten cocktail shaker in his hands. As May played, her face changed. The careful mask of the efficient server fell away, revealing the soul of an artist. Her eyes remained closed, but tears slid down her cheeks as her fingers danced across the keys, releasing years of suppressed passion into the stunned silence of Bellini's. Thomas sat motionless, bourbon forgotten, as he realized the magnitude of what his casual dare had unleashed. He had expected entertainment. What he was receiving was a master class, a window into human potential and lost dreams. As the piece built toward its climax, every person in the room understood they were witnessing something extraordinary. A rare moment when pretense falls away and raw truth emerges, beautiful and heartbreaking in its authenticity. The world, outside Bellini's, continued its busy pace, but inside, time seemed suspended as a waitress named May reclaimed a part of herself she had thought was gone forever. The final notes of Rachmaninoff hung in the air like crystal suspended in sunlight. For several heartbeats, no one moved. No one breathed. The spell May had cast with her playing held the entire restaurant in a moment outside of time. Then, like a wave breaking against shore, the applause began. It started with a single pair of hands, an elderly man in the corner who rose shakily to his feet, his weathered face wet with tears, and spread until the entire restaurant thundered with it. People stood, napkins clutched in hands, drinks forgotten, food growing cold as they witnessed something extraordinary unfold in this ordinary Friday evening. May opened her eyes slowly, as if waking from a dream. Her fingers still rested lightly on the keys, reluctant to break contact now that the connection had been restored. The sound of applause reached her gradually, pulling her back to the present moment, to Bellini's, to her life as a server rather than a pianist. She stood and gave a small, uncertain bow, muscle memory from a childhood spent on stages across Asia and then America. Her cheeks flushed with color as the applause continued, showing no signs of fading. Thomas Reed remained seated, his expression unreadable as he watched her. The smugness that had accompanied his dare was gone, replaced by something more complex. Wonder, perhaps, or the humility that comes from witnessing true mastery. He reached for his checkbook with hands that weren't quite steady. Carlo, the restaurant manager, stood frozen halfway between the kitchen and the piano, his mouth slightly open. In 3 years of working together, he had never suspected May's hidden talent. Now he watched as his reliable, quiet server accepted a standing ovation from Chicago's elite, with the grace of someone who had once belonged in their world. "That was extraordinary," came a voice at May's elbow as the applause finally began to subside. She turned to find an elegant older woman with silver hair pulled into a sleek chignon. "I'm Lily Winters, with the Chicago Symphony Orchestra." "Where did you train?" May's throat tightened. "A long time ago," she managed. "It doesn't matter now." "On the contrary," Lily persisted, her eyes sharp with interest. "That kind of training always matters. That technique wasn't self-taught." Before May could respond, Thomas appeared at her side, a check in his hand. "A deal's a deal," he said, his voice lacking its earlier challenge. He held out the check, and May saw that he had written it for twice the amount he'd promised. $200,000. Her hand trembled as she took it. "Mr. Reed, this is—" "Fair payment for what you just gave us," he interrupted, gesturing around the room where diners were still watching, many filming with their phones. "I've paid 10 times that for corporate entertainment that didn't deliver. A fraction of what you just did." Lily Winters hadn't moved. "Young lady, we should talk. The symphony has been looking for a new pianist since Huang left for New York. I'd like you to audition." May shook her head slightly, overwhelmed by the sudden shift in her reality. 20 minutes ago, she had been taking drink orders and describing the specials. Now she held a check that would change her life, while the director of the Chicago Symphony Orchestra asked for her credentials. "I haven't played in 8 years," she whispered. "Before tonight." Lily's eyebrows rose. "That's impossible." "It's true," May said. "I stopped when I was 18. A movement near the kitchen caught her eye. Her co-workers had gathered in a tight group, staring at her with expressions ranging from shock to admiration. Jin, the dishwasher who had always been kind to her, gave her a thumbs up. Ava, another server who had covered shifts for May when her brother was sick, was openly crying. Her brother. The thought of Kai brought May back to reality with sudden clarity. Kai, who at 16 was brilliant and thoughtful and deserved so much more than their tiny apartment and second-hand clothes. Kai, whose college fund consisted of whatever tips May could save after paying for rent and groceries and their mother's ongoing medical care. The check in her hand suddenly felt like much more than paper. It was a key, a way out, a chance to give Kai the opportunities she had lost. "I need to get back to work," she said, folding the check carefully and slipping it into her pocket. "Work?" Thomas laughed incredulously. "After what just happened? My tables are waiting," May replied, moving toward Carlo to retrieve her apron. "Hold on," called a voice from the back of the restaurant. The crowd parted to reveal a distinguished Asian man in his 60s, thin and elegant in an expensive suit. He made his way toward the piano, moving with deliberate steps. Something about his bearing made the room fall silent again. "I thought I recognized the style," he said in accented English, studying May's face. "But it couldn't be. The girl I'm thinking of disappeared many years ago." May froze, recognition dawning slowly. "Professor Wu?" The old man's face broke into a smile. "Little Mei Lin, the Shanghai prodigy." He turned to address the crowd. "When this young woman was 8 years old, she played Liszt's La Campanella without a single error at the International Youth Competition in Beijing. I was a judge. We all wept." He turned back to May. "And then you vanished. Your family moved to America, we heard. Letters went unanswered. Scholarships remained unclaimed." May's hands clenched at her sides. "My father's business failed. Then, he got sick. We needed money, not music." Professor Wu nodded sadly. "So you became invisible, a server in a restaurant hiding your gift." He gestured to the piano. "But the music was always there waiting." The restaurant had gone completely quiet again. Everyone straining to hear this unexpected twist in an already remarkable evening. Phones recorded surreptitiously from tables and corners, capturing a moment that would soon be shared with thousands. "Professor?" May began, then stopped, unsure what to say. How could she explain the years of necessity, of practicality, of putting dreams aside to keep her family afloat? How could anyone understand unless they had stood where she had stood, made the choices she had made? "Play something else," Professor Wu said gently. "Something you loved as a child." May shook her head. "I can't. I have tables. I'll cover them," came Ava's voice from near the kitchen. "Play, May." Other voices joined in, urging her back to the piano. Even Carlo nodded, his initial shock replaced by pride at having such talent under his roof. "Go ahead, May. The restaurant is yours tonight." Thomas Reed watched the scene unfold with growing interest. He had initiated this drama on a whim, never expecting it to become something so meaningful. Now he found himself invested in the outcome, wanting to see what would happen next. May looked around at the expectant faces, at Professor Wu with his kind eyes that had once judged her worthy of a future she hadn't been able to claim, at Lily Winters, who offered a second chance she had never thought to hope for, at her co-workers who saw her now as something more than just another server. Slowly, she returned to the piano bench. This time her hands didn't tremble as they touched the keys. This time she chose a piece not for its technical difficulty, but for the pure joy it had once brought her. The opening notes of Debussy's Clair de Lune filled the restaurant. Where Rachmaninoff had been passion and fire, this was moonlight, on water, gentle and luminous. May played with her eyes open this time, watching her hands remember what her mind had tried to forget. As she played, Thomas pulled out his phone and began to type rapidly. His assistant would be confused by the late-night text, but some opportunities couldn't wait until morning. A talent like May's shouldn't be serving drinks, no matter how much money he gave her tonight. She needed more than a one-time payment. She needed a path back to where she belonged. By the time the final gentle notes of Debussy faded, Thomas had set something in motion that would change more than just May's life. The foundation he'd been considering for months now had a focus, a purpose, a face to put on the mission statement. Professor Wu approached the piano again when she finished. "Will you disappear again, Maylene?" he asked quietly. "Or will you reclaim what was always meant to be yours?" Before she could answer, Carlo's voice called out from near the entrance. "May, there's someone here for you." The crowd parted once more to reveal a teenage boy with May's same dark eyes and serious expression. He pushed through the diners, confusion evident on his face. "Kai," May said, rising from the piano bench. "What are you doing here?" "Someone sent me a video," he replied, holding up his phone. "It's all over social media already. Waitress plays Rachmaninoff stuns Millionaire. That's you, right? That's what you've never talked about?" The restaurant watched in hushed interest as brother and sister stood facing each other, years of unspoken history between them. Kai glanced at the piano, then back at his sister. "You gave it up for us, didn't you?" he asked, his young voice cracking slightly. "For me and Mom." May didn't answer, but her silence was confirmation enough. "Play with her," called someone from the crowd. Others took up the suggestion, voices rising in encouragement. Kai shook his head. "I don't know how. She never taught me." "I couldn't," May said softly. "It hurt too much." Thomas Reed stepped forward then. "Maybe it's time for that to change," he said. "For both of you." He looked at May. "Would you teach others if you had the chance? Would you share what was shared? With you?" The question hung in the air between them, loaded with possibility. May looked around the restaurant, at the fancy plates and expensive wine, at the wealthy patrons who had stopped seeing her as invisible, at the piano that had awoken something she had tried so hard to bury. "I don't know," she answered honestly. "I've been running away from music for so long, I'm not sure I remember how to run toward it." "Then perhaps," said Professor Wu, "it's time to stand still and let the music find you again." As conversation resumed around them and the evening's regular rhythm slowly returned, May found herself at a crossroads she had never expected to face. The check in her pocket represented freedom from financial worry. The business card Lily Winters, pressed into her hand, represented a return to a world she had abandoned. The pride in her brother's eyes represented a truth she had hidden for too long. And somewhere, in a corner of her heart that had been silent for 8 years, a melody began to play again. 3 days after the night that changed everything, May sat at a piano that wasn't in a restaurant. The sleek black Steinway grand dominated Thomas Reed's penthouse living room, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a breathtaking view of Chicago's skyline. Her fingers moved over the keys without pressing them, feeling the cool ivory beneath. Her fingertips, "It's yours," Thomas said from across the room where he leaned against a minimalist white sofa. "Consider it part of our arrangement." May looked up sharply. "I can't accept a piano like this." The check was already too much. Thomas shrugged, sipping his coffee. "The check was our deal, the piano is different." He walked over to stand beside the instrument. "Look, I've had this thing for years. It was more of a status symbol than anything else. I played a little as a kid, hated every minute of it. This piano deserves someone who will actually use it." "I live in a 2-bedroom apartment with my brother and mother," May said quietly. "There's barely room for our kitchen table, let alone a concert grand." "Then keep it here," Thomas replied, simply. "Use the space whenever you want, I'm hardly ever home anyway." He handed her a keycard. "The doorman will know to expect you." May stared at the keycard without taking it. Her world had been spinning out of control since Friday night. The video of her playing had gone viral, with millions of views across multiple platforms. Her phone hadn't stopped ringing with calls from reporters, television producers, and music agents. Carlo had given her 2 weeks of paid leave from Bellini's. Her co-workers had created a group chat titled May's Fan Club, where they shared every new article or social media post about her. Through it all, she had remained frozen, unsure how to step into this strange new reality where her most private pain had become public spectacle. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, finally looking up at Thomas. "The money, the piano, all of it. You don't even know me." Thomas was quiet for a moment, considering his answer. "My mother wanted to be a writer," he said eventually. "She had real talent, but she married young, had kids, worked 2 jobs to keep us fed. By the time I was successful enough to support her, it was too late. The creativity had dried up. She couldn't find her way back. He ran his hand along the piano's glossy surface. I guess I see a chance to change the ending for someone else. The honesty in his voice surprised May. The arrogant millionaire who had dared her to play at Bellini's seemed far removed from this thoughtful man sharing a personal story. I'm scared, she admitted, the words slipping out before she could stop. Them? Of what? Of wanting this again? Her hands hovered over the keys. For years I've told myself that music was my past, that I had moved on. If I let myself love it again. She trailed off, unable to articulate the fear that had kept her away from pianos for 8 years. Then you might lose it again. Thomas finished for her. And that would hurt even more the second time. May nodded, grateful for his understanding. Well, Thomas said, placing the keycard on the piano. The door's open whenever you're ready. No pressure, no expectations. Just you and the piano figuring things out together. As he walked toward the kitchen to refill his coffee, May's phone buzzed with a text. It was from Lily Winters. The symphony board would like to meet you tomorrow. Informal conversation only. Say yes. Another text arrived moments later, this one from Professor Wu. Having dinner with some old colleagues tonight. They remember you. They want to help. Join us? May set the phone down, feeling overwhelmed. For years, she had lived a simple, structured life. Wake up, help mom with her physical therapy, get Kai off to school, work her shift at Bellini's, come, home, pay bills, sleep, repeat. The routine had been exhausting but straightforward. Now, opportunity knocked from every direction, and each door potentially led to a life she had long ago forced herself to stop dreaming about. I should go, she said, standing abruptly. My mother will be waiting for her medication. Thomas nodded, not pushing. The offer stands. And May, whatever you decide about any of this, it's your choice. Not your family's, not mine, not the internet's. Yours. The words followed her home, echoing in her mind as she rode the L train back to their apartment in a much less glamorous part of the city. Your choice. When was the last time any major decision in her life had been truly hers? Even her original pursuit of music had been guided by her parents' ambitions, their recognition of her talent, their willingness to sacrifice for her future. When she unlocked the apartment door, she found her mother sitting at their small kitchen table with Kai, a stack of papers spread out before them. They looked up as she entered, both wearing expressions she couldn't quite read. What's going on? May asked, setting down her bag. Her mother, Lynn, whose stroke 3 years ago had left her with a limp and slurred speech, pushed a paper toward her. College applications, she said carefully, each word requiring effort. For Kai. Early decision. May picked up the paper. It was an application to Juilliard, the same school she had once been destined to attend. I don't understand, she said, looking at her brother. You want to study music? Since when? Kai shrugged, not meeting her eyes. Since always. I just never said anything because you didn't. You never even played an instrument, May said, confused. Yes, I did. Kai finally looked up. Mrs. Donovan next door taught me piano when you were at work. I practiced at school during lunch. I didn't want you to know because I thought it would make you sad. Lynn reached out and took May's hand. He's good, she said with a mother's pride. Different from you. More jazz. She smiled at the word. May sat down heavily, trying to process this revelation. But Juilliard is expensive, even with the money from Mr. Reed. There's more, Kai interrupted. He slid his phone across the table, opened to an email. This came an hour ago. May read it silently, her eyes widening. It was from the Thomas Reed Foundation for Musical Excellence, offering Kai a full scholarship if he was accepted to any music program in the country. The Thomas Reed Foundation? She repeated. That doesn't exist. At least it didn't 3 days ago. It does now, Kai said. There's a website and everything. It says its mission is to identify and support hidden musical talent. He paused. You're on the front page, May. Your video from Bellini's. May leaned back in her chair, stunned. Thomas had created an entire foundation in just 3 days? Was this some elaborate game to him, throwing money at her family for his own entertainment? Her thoughts were interrupted by a knock at the door. Kai went to answer it, returning with a small package. It's for you, he said, handing it to May. Inside, she found a thumb drive and a note in elegant handwriting. May, thought you should see what the world is saying. Don't be afraid of the light. It was always yours to stand in. L.W. Later that night, after her mother had gone to bed, May and Kai huddled around their old laptop, watching the contents of the thumb drive Lily Winters had sent. It contained dozens of reaction videos to May's performance, music teachers analyzing her technique, professional pianists expressing admiration, ordinary people sharing how the video had moved them to tears or inspired them to return to instruments they had abandoned. One video in particular caught their attention, a renowned concert pianist speaking directly to the camera. What we witnessed in that restaurant was not just technical skill, which she has in abundance, but the raw emotion of someone reconnecting with their deepest self. It reminds us why we make music in the first place, not to show off, but to express what cannot be said in words. Kai turned to his sister when the videos finally ended. Why didn't you ever tell me? He asked quietly. About how good you were? About what you gave up for us? May was silent for a long moment. Because I needed to believe it was my choice, she finally said. That I chose family over music. If I admitted how much I missed it, how much it hurt to stop playing. She shook her head. It would have felt like blaming you and Mom, and it was never your fault. But it wasn't really your choice either, was it? Kai pressed. You were 18. You shouldn't have had to carry all of that. Neither should you, May replied, looking at the college applications spread across their small living room. You've been hiding your music just like I've been hiding from mine. Brother and sister sat in silence, the weight of unspoken dreams filling the space between them. Play for me, May said suddenly. I want to hear what jazz sounds like on you. Kai looked startled. Here? Now? We don't have a piano. May grabbed her coat. Yes, we do. Come on. An hour later, they stood in Thomas Reed's penthouse, May using the key card he had left her. The city lights sparkled through the windows as Kai approached the Steinway with reverence. Are you sure it's okay for us to be here? He whispered. Mr. Reed said any time, May replied, gesturing toward the piano. Show me what you can do, little brother. Kai sat down nervously, placed his hands on the keys, and began to play. The sound that emerged was nothing like May's classical precision. Kai's music was fluid, improvisational, full of unexpected turns and blue notes that spoke of a completely different tradition. But the passion was the same, the total absorption, the sense of the player becoming one with the instrument. May watched, transfixed as her brother revealed a side of himself she had never known existed. In his playing, she heard echoes of the musicians he must have studied in secret. Thelonious Monk, Herbie Hancock, Bill Evans, all filtered through Kai's unique sensibility. When he finished, the apartment was silent except for the distant sounds of the city below. That was beautiful, May said softly. Kai turned on the bench to face her. Your turn. May hesitated, then slowly took his place at the piano. This time, when her fingers touched the keys, there was no audience, no dare, no pressure, just the music that had lived inside her for 8 silent years, finally finding its way out again. As she played, a decision crystallized in her mind. The path forward wasn't about choosing between music and family anymore. Perhaps it never had been. Perhaps the real choice was between fear and possibility, between hiding and living fully. The melody under her fingers transformed, becoming something new, not purely classical, not purely jazz, but a conversation between traditions. Kai recognized the invitation and joined her on the bench, adding his own voice to the improvisation. In that moment, as brother and sister played together for the first time, the future began to take shape, uncertain still, but full of promise. 2. Weeks after the night at Bellini's, May stood backstage at Symphony Center, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her fingertips. The murmur of the audience on the other side of the curtain sounded like ocean waves, distant yet overwhelming. She smoothed down the simple black dress Lily Winters had helped her choose, fighting the urge to flee. 5 minutes, a stagehand told her with an encouraging smile. May nodded, unable to speak. How had she ended up here? The past 14 days had been a whirlwind of rehearsals, meetings, and decisions that seemed to accelerate with each passing hour. The video of her playing at Bellini's had reached 20 million views. Newspapers had run stories with headlines like "Restaurant Server Reveals Hidden Genius" and "The Waitress Who Shocked Chicago's Elite." 3 different record labels had contacted her with offers. A documentary filmmaker wanted to tell her story. And, through it all, May had moved as if in a dream, letting the current carry her forward while her mind struggled to catch up with her new reality. "You look terrified," came a voice behind her. Thomas Reed stood there looking different in a formal suit than he had in his casual clothes at the penthouse. "Having second thoughts?" "Fourth and fifth thoughts," May admitted. "I haven't performed on a real stage since I was 16. Thomas leaned against the wall. "You know you don't have to do this, right? The foundation grant for your brother isn't contingent on you performing tonight. Neither is your mother's new medical care plan." May gave him a small smile. "I know. You've been very clear about that." And he had been. In the days following their encounter at Bellini's, Thomas had revealed a thoughtfulness that contradicted May's first impression of him. The foundation he had created wasn't just for show. He had assembled a board of respected music educators, established clear guidelines for applicants, and set aside funding that would support dozens of musicians from disadvantaged backgrounds. Kai's scholarship was just the beginning. "Then why do this to yourself?" Thomas asked. "Why put yourself through the stress?" May took a deep breath. "Because I need to know," she said simply. "I need to know if this is still part of who I am, or if it's something I've outgrown." Thomas nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Well, for what it's worth, the entire board of the foundation is out there. So is your family. So are half the staff from Bellini's." He grinned. Carlo closed the restaurant for the night. First time in 20 years, apparently. The thought of all those people waiting to hear her play sent another wave of panic through May. But mingled with the fear was something else. A sense of coming full circle, of pieces falling into place after years of being scattered. "Ms. Lynn?" The stagehand was back. "It's time." Thomas gave her shoulder a gentle squeeze. "Break a leg, or whatever it is you piano people say to each other." As he walked away, May's phone buzzed with a text. It was from Kai. "Mom and I are in the third row. You've got this, sis." Attached was a photo of their mother, dressed in her best clothes, looking prouder than May had seen her in years. Beside her sat Professor Wu and several other faces May recognized from her childhood competition days. People who had believed in her talent long before Thomas Reed's dare had forced her to acknowledge it again. The stagehand held the curtain open, and May stepped onto the stage. The spotlight was blinding at first, the audience a dark mass beyond its glare. The concert grand piano gleamed in the center of the stage, lid raised, keys exposed like a question waiting for an answer. May approached it with measured steps, the way she had been taught as a child. Back straight, chin slightly lifted, eyes forward. She sat, adjusted the bench, and placed her hands in her lap for a moment, gathering herself. The audience was completely silent now, holding a collective breath. In the past 2 weeks, she had practiced for hours each day at Thomas's penthouse, reacquainting her fingers with the music she had once known by heart. Some pieces had returned, easily as if they had been waiting patiently in her muscle memory. Others had resisted, requiring her to work through passages again and again until they yielded to her will. Tonight she would play 3 pieces. The first was Rachmaninoff, a nod to the performance that had changed everything. The second was a Chopin nocturne she had played in her final competition before leaving music behind. And the third, May took a deep breath and began. The opening chords of Rachmaninoff filled the concert hall, powerful and confident. This time, there was no hesitation, no uncertainty, just May and the music finding each other again. Her body swayed slightly as she played, eyes closed, letting the familiar patterns flow through her like water finding its natural path. In the audience, Thomas Reed sat next to Lily Winters, watching May's transformation on stage. This was not the nervous server from Bellini's, nor even the woman who had played with raw emotion when dared. This was an artist reclaiming her power, stepping fully into her gift. "She's extraordinary," Lily whispered. "I've heard professionals with decades of training who can't convey emotion like that." Thomas nodded, feeling a strange mixture of pride and humility. He had set something in motion with his impulsive dare, but May had taken it far beyond anything he could have imagined. His role now was simply to witness, to support where needed, and to step back where not. As the Rachmaninoff drew to its thunderous conclusion, the audience erupted in applause. May acknowledged it with a slight bow before moving directly into the Chopin, a piece filled with quiet longing, with moonlight and shadow, with questions that had no simple answers. In the third row, May's mother wiped tears from her eyes as she watched her daughter play. For years, Lynn had carried the weight of guilt for her family's circumstances, for the dreams May had abandoned for their sake. Now, seeing her child reunited with her gift, some of that burden began to lift. Beside her, Kai watched with rapt attention, his fingers moving slightly on his knees as if playing along. His sister's courage in facing her past had given him permission to embrace his own musical future. Yesterday, he had received an email from Juilliard requesting an audition, the first step toward a path he had scarcely allowed himself to imagine. The Chopin ended on a delicate questioning note that hung in the air for several heartbeats before the audience responded with appreciative applause. May opened her eyes, looking out at the darkened hall for the first time since she had begun playing. Now came the third piece, the one she had chosen not from her past repertoire, but from the new possibilities that had opened before her. She took a moment to center herself, hands poised above the keys. What emerged was not classical music as the audience expected. Instead, May began to play an original composition, one she and Kai had created together during their late-night sessions at Thomas's penthouse. It began with classical structure, but gradually incorporated jazz elements, building a bridge between her training and her brother's self-taught explorations. In the audience, people leaned forward, surprised and intrigued by this unexpected turn. Thomas glanced at Lily, who raised her eyebrows in delighted surprise. Halfway through the piece, May paused. She looked toward the side of the stage and nodded. Kai stepped out from the wings, carrying a trumpet, an instrument he had taught himself to play during those secret lunch hours at school. He joined his sister at the piano, and together they completed the composition they had written, classical and jazz traditions intertwining in a musical conversation that spoke of loss and rediscovery, of separate journeys finding common ground. The audience sat in stunned silence when they finished, brother and sister side by side on the stage where neither had expected to stand. Then, as if a dam had broken, applause thundered through the concert hall. People rose to their feet, cheering, and calling for more. Backstage after the performance, May found herself surrounded by well-wishers. Carlo from Bellini's presented her with a bouquet of flowers from the restaurant staff. Professor Wu clasped her hands and spoke of upcoming master classes she might teach. Lily Winters introduced her to conductors and musicians who expressed interest in future collaborations. Through it all, May felt a strange sense of calm. The panic that had gripped her before the performance had dissolved, replaced by certainty. This was where she belonged, not because someone else had decided it for her, but because she had finally chosen it for herself. Later, as the crowd thinned, she found Thomas standing by the exit. "Thank you," she said simply. He shook his head. "I just made a dare. You did all the rest." "Not all of it," May insisted. The foundation, Kai's scholarship, Mom's medical care. You changed our lives. Thomas looked thoughtful. Maybe. Or maybe I just removed some obstacles. The talent, the determination, the courage to face your past, that was all you, May. What happens now? She asked. That's entirely up to you, Thomas replied. The foundation will continue its work. Your brother has his audition next month. The Chicago Symphony has offered you a position if you want it. Or there are recording, contracts, teaching opportunities, concert tours. He smiled. The world has opened up. Where you go from here is your choice. May thought about the long journey that had brought her to this moment. The childhood dedicated to music, the years of silent sacrifice, the unexpected dare that had broken her carefully constructed walls. She thought about her brother finding his own musical voice in secret, about her mother's pride as she watched her children perform together, about the restaurant staff who had seen her as just another server, until music revealed the truth she had hidden from everyone, including herself. I think, she said slowly, I'd like to help find others like me and Kai. People with talent who got sidetracked by life. People who need someone to dare them to remember who they really are. Thomas's face broke into a genuine smile. The foundation could use a director who understands the mission from the inside out. And I'll still play, May added quickly, and help Kai prepare for Juilliard, and maybe teach some master classes like Professor Wu suggested. Sounds like a full life, Thomas observed. May nodded, a sense of possibility expanding within her chest. Yes, she agreed. A full life. Finally. As they walked toward the exit where Kai and her mother waited, May realized something important. The music had never really left her. It had been there all along, patient and persistent, waiting for her to find her way back. And now that she would make sure that path remained open, not just for herself, but for others whose gifts remained hidden, waiting for the moment when they too would be dared to remember. 1 year later, May stood in the back of a crowded auditorium, watching a young woman approach the piano on stage. The girl couldn't have been more than 17, with nervous hands and determined eyes. She wore a simple dress that had clearly been carefully selected for the occasion, and her hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail. Her name is Zoe, Thomas whispered, appearing at May's side. She works at her family's laundromat after school. Teaches herself piano on a keyboard she bought at a pawnshop. May nodded, feeling a flutter of recognition. How did you find her? I didn't, Thomas replied with a smile. Your brother did, during one of his community outreach sessions for the foundation. On stage, Zoe sat at the piano, took a deep breath, and began to play. The piece was Debussy, the same Clair de Lune that May had played during her second performance at Bellini's a year ago. But Zoe brought something different to it, a rawness, an urgency that spoke of her own unique journey. May watched intently, noting both the technical mistakes and the undeniable spark of genuine talent. This girl had something special, the same quality that Professor Wu had recognized in May all those years ago in Shanghai. As the final notes faded, the small audience of foundation members, music educators, and potential sponsors applauded warmly. Zoe looked up, surprised and pleased by the reception. Her eyes scanned the crowd until they found May, and a flash of recognition crossed her face. Everyone knew May's story now, the waitress whose hidden talent had launched a movement. After the auditions ended, May made her way backstage where the young performers gathered. Some chatted excitedly, others sat quietly with their instruments. All of them had stories similar to Zoe's. Extraordinary talent hidden by ordinary circumstances. Dreams deferred by necessity. You were wonderful, May told Zoe, who blushed at the compliment. I messed up the middle section, the girl admitted. My hands got sweaty. Mine too, every time, May confided with a smile. Even now. Zoe looked at her skeptically. But you play with the symphony. I saw your concert last month. And I still get nervous, May insisted. The difference is I've learned that the music is stronger than the fear. The girl considered this, turning it over in her mind. Do you think, do you think I could ever play like you? May looked at the calluses on Zoe's fingers, evidence of hours spent practicing after long days of work. She recognized the hunger, in the girl's eyes the same hunger that had driven her as a child. I think you'll play like yourself, May answered. And that will be even better. Later that evening, May sat in Thomas's penthouse, now the unofficial headquarters of the Reed Foundation for Musical Excellence. The space had transformed over the past year. The minimalist bachelor pad had given way to a warm, creative environment, with multiple instruments, comfortable seating, and walls lined with photos of the foundation's students and performances. Kai sprawled on the sofa, his Juilliard acceptance letter framed on the wall behind him. He had deferred his enrollment for a year to help build the foundation, and in that time had discovered a talent for identifying promising musicians in unexpected places. I think we should offer Zoe the scholarship, he said, scrolling through notes on his tablet. Her technical skills need work, but her musicality is off the charts. Thomas nodded in agreement. What about the boy with the violin? Liu? Full scholarship to music camp this summer, May replied, and we should connect him with Professor Wu for weekly lessons. Their mother, Lin, brought in a tray of tea, her movements much steadier than they had been a year ago. The new medical treatment Thomas had arranged had improved her mobility significantly. She still had limitations, but she had found purpose as the foundation's unofficial house mother, making the nervous young musicians feel welcome and understood. You work too hard, she told May in her careful English, setting down the tea. Always meetings, teaching, playing. Need rest too. May smiled at her mother's concern. I'll rest next week after the benefit concert. The upcoming performance would be the foundation's biggest yet, a collaboration between established classical musicians and the program's students. The proceeds would fund the next year of scholarships, expanding their reach beyond Chicago to other cities where talent went undiscovered. Thomas checked his watch. Speaking of which, we should head over to Bellini's. Carlo's expecting us at 8. The restaurant had become an unlikely partner in their work. After May's viral moment, Carlo had installed a proper performance space and began hosting regular, hidden talent nights that drew crowds eager to discover the next sensation. Tonight was the 1-year anniversary of May's life-changing performance, and Carlo had planned a special event to commemorate it. When they arrived, Bellini's was transformed. The tables had been rearranged to face the new performance area, where the piano, a significant upgrade from the one May had played, took center stage. The walls now featured photographs of performers who had shared their gifts during the past year, a dishwasher who played violin with soul-stirring intensity, a valet with a tenor voice that could fill a cathedral, a shy hostess whose flamenco guitar made listeners weep. Carlo greeted them at the door with his customary enthusiasm. There she is, our star. He hugged May warmly. 1 year ago today, you changed everything. Not just for me, May replied, gesturing around the restaurant. Carlo nodded proudly. Business is up 60%. We have waiting lists every weekend for the performances. People come for dinner and stay for the music. He leaned in conspiratorially. And between us, 3 of my staff have received foundation scholarships. Who knew I had so much talent washing dishes and serving breadsticks? As they made their way to their table, the same one Thomas had occupied a year ago, May was stopped by well-wishers and admirers. Some had seen her perform with the symphony. Others had attended foundation events, and a few simply knew her from the video that had now been viewed over 50 million times. Does it ever feel strange? Thomas asked when they were finally seated. Being recognized everywhere you go? May considered the question. Sometimes, she admitted. But mostly I'm just grateful. Not everyone gets a second chance at a dream they thought was lost forever. Thomas raised his glass. To second chances, then. As they clinked glasses, Ava, who had covered May's tables that fateful night and now managed the restaurant's music program, approached with a mischievous smile. We have a surprise for you, she announced. It's only right that the 1-year anniversary should feature the woman who started it all. May laughed, shaking her head. No way, I'm here as a guest tonight. Too late, Kai chimed in with a grin. It's already on the program. Before May could protest further, the lights dimmed and Carlo stepped into the performance area with a microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our special anniversary celebration. 1 year ago tonight, something extraordinary happened in this very room. As Carlo recounted the now familiar story, May glanced around the table at the unlikely family she had gathered. Her brother, whose own musical journey had blossomed alongside hers. Her mother, whose quiet strength had sustained them through years of hardship. Thomas, whose impulsive dare had shattered the walls she had built around her heart. And beyond them, the extended family of the foundation, students, teachers, supporters, and friends who had joined their mission to bring music back to those who had lost it. When Carlo called her name, the restaurant erupted in applause. May rose and made her way to the piano, feeling none of the terror that had gripped her a year ago. This time she approached the instrument as an old friend, settling onto the bench with comfortable familiarity. "This isn't the piece I played last year," she told the audience. "This is something new, something that didn't exist until life took an unexpected turn." Her fingers found the keys, and music filled the room, a composition she had written about her journey. It began with hesitant, disconnected notes that gradually found their pattern, their purpose, building toward a theme of quiet determination. As the piece progressed, other voices joined in, hints of Kai's jazz influence, echoes of the classical masters who had shaped her early years, and something entirely her own that spoke of loss, rediscovery, and the courage to begin again. In the middle of the piece, she nodded toward the back of the restaurant, where Zoe stood with her pawnshop keyboard. The girl had been invited as a special guest but hadn't expected to perform. With encouraging nods from Kai and Thomas, she made her way to the front and sat up beside the piano. Together, teacher and student, past and future, created something new. The restaurant fell silent as the two musicians, separated by years and experience but connected by shared understanding, built a musical bridge between what had been lost and what had been found. When they finished, the room remained silent for a heartbeat before bursting into applause. Thomas watched May's face as she took in the response, not with surprise this time, but with quiet acceptance of her gift and her place in the world. Later, as they walked along the Chicago riverfront, May and Thomas paused to look at the city lights reflecting on the water. "Happy anniversary," Thomas said softly. 1 year since a millionaire dared a waitress to play the piano." May smiled, and the entire room was shocked. "I wasn't just shocking the room," Thomas admitted. "I was trying to shock you out of hiding. I saw something in you that reminded me of what my mother lost. And now I see something I never expected," he replied. "You've built something remarkable, May. Not just a career for yourself, but a path for others." May thought about Zoe, about Liu with his violin, about all the hidden talents still waiting to be discovered. "We're just getting started," she said. "There are so many more out there, people with gifts the world needs to hear." "Well then," Thomas said, offering his arm as they turned back toward the glittering city, "we'd better get to work." As they walked, May felt the music inside her. No longer a source of pain, but a wellspring of possibility. The notes of a new composition were already forming in her mind. A piece about finding your way back to yourself after a long absence. About daring to be who you were always meant to be. 1 year ago, a dare had changed everything. But the real miracle wasn't that a waitress could play piano and shock a room full of strangers. The real miracle was that sometimes, when we least expect it, life offers us the chance to become whole again.